It is July 14th, 2025, and the Trump administration is setting one dangerous precedent after another as they move to impose sanctions on Francesca Albanese, the UN Special Rapporteur for the West Bank and Gaza, literally for criticizing Israel for daring to call them out for the ongoing genocide that they are committing and that the US is supporting against the Palestinians. All of this as you're also watching as the US and Israel are now openly planning to create a concentration camp in southern Gaza. Look, we are having this conversation today in 2025. We've got a lot of very important things to get to. But before we get there, I do want to take a moment to wish Mr. Jax a very special happy birthday. He is 12 years old today, and I will come up from his nap to get him to come hang out and say hi. He has already been showered with all kinds of treats to celebrate his special day, and that is only going to continue. So, thank you so much to all of you who always leave kind comments whenever he's featured in videos, and then you ask where he is when he isn't here. He's here. He's doing good. Happy birthday to the Jax man. Would you like another treat? Do you want a treat? Okay, we'll go get one here in a second. All right. A happy moment in all of the chaos. And now I do want to get to the very important news of what this video is actually about. So let's take a listen to today's interview. Joining me now to discuss is Dr. Ramzy Baroud, a Palestinian-American journalist, author, and editor of the Palestine Chronicle. Dr. Baroud, thanks so much for taking the time to join me.
Thanks for having me, Rachel. Always a pleasure.
Always good to talk to you. Now, I want to get your take on the latest here. And I want to first start off with a story that has been in the news for a few days, but I do not feel like it has received nearly enough coverage, despite the very important and dangerous precedent that it sets. And that is that the Trump administration is imposing sanctions on Francesca Albanese, the UN Special Rapporteur for the West Bank and Gaza, following an unsuccessful pressure campaign to force the UN to remove her from her post, all because she has been openly critical and rightfully so of Israel and the genocide that it is openly committing. So, what was your reaction to this decision, and should it come as a surprise that the Trump administration would do something like this at this point?
Honestly, not entirely surprised. I mean, this is something that we would have expected considering the major crackdown on freedom of expression and protests and any kind of civil society mobilization that's happening in the US and all around the world. I mean, I want to say we live in very strange times, and we do, but also this is not the first time that the United States have, placed sanctions on UN officials or semi-officials because Albanese does not work for Guterres. She is not employed by the United Nations, and therefore she is not held accountable to whatever political agenda of the UN. But we have seen this happening before. I mean, the US placed sanctions on judges involved with the International Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice for merely even opening investigations into Israeli war crimes in Gaza, or issuing arrest warrants for Israeli war criminals. So to kind of see Francesca Albanese kind of joining that list, it was something that we somewhat expected, but also tells you how debased the nature of the conversation on Palestine and Israel have become. I mean, I've read pretty much everything that Francesca Albanese has produced as the UN human rights envoy, even before the genocide in Gaza. And I can't imagine from any legal or humanitarian point of view, why would Francesca be sanctioned? What did she say that was particularly wrong or offensive, aside from Israel needs to respect international law? I mean, ultimately, that's what it is. Israel needs to respect humanitarian laws. Israel needs to be held accountable. The international community and members of the UN need to be brave enough to rein in Israel and the war criminal cabinet of Netanyahu. For Trump and of course for Israel, but for the Trump administration, this is extremely offensive that warrants punishment. Francesca had to be punished like others before her from the ICC, ICJ, and elsewhere have to be punished, so that even the mere critique or criticism of Israeli action, let alone the fact that these actions are carrying on with absolutely no one stopping them, but the mere critique now becomes also criminal. We live indeed in very, very strange times, and if these precedents continue to take place day after day, the international system is going to entirely collapse, all because Netanyahu does not want to stop his genociding.
Yeah, and it's crazy to watch, and I know that I've even seen, rhetoric online criticizing Francesca Albanese for not being even more critical of the genocide, right? I know she's been very outspoken, but you still have people out there saying, "Oh, she's not doing enough." And yet what she is doing is apparently enough to be sanctioned by the US. And the timing of this was kind of ironic, as in the same week that the Trump administration goes after her, they also decide to remove the foreign terrorist designation on HTS, on Nusra Front, Al-Qaeda, whatever name you want to give it, in Syria, with Secretary of State Marco Rubio claiming that this move is an important step in fulfilling Trump's vision of a stable, unified, and peaceful Syria. Now, I have seen the exact opposite of all of that so far in Syria with Al Qaeda in power. But what does that tell us when the US is setting up this system where if you dare to criticize Israel, then we're going to go after you, we could sanction you, we're going to try to ruin your life. But if you agree to normalize ties with Israel, look the other way, maybe even give up some additional land for Israel, oh, and then all of a sudden we're going to greet you with, removing sanctions, maybe some, foreign aid or whatever else the US wants to throw in there. But that really is the precedent that they're setting.
That's right. I mean, let's be clear. Trump doesn't have an agenda. He had all of these empty slogans that were selling. I mean, they sold enough that he became a president for a second term. But from a foreign policy point of view, he really doesn't have an agenda, nor does he actually understand the complexity of the international system. He is extremely ignorant of politics, of geography, of so much more. I mean, recently he made a statement to the effect that North Lebanon should become part of southern Syria or should be part of Syria. He doesn't know, first of all, he doesn't know history. And also, he just threw in there that kind of this massive, kind of political bomb with the hope of kind of kind of creating this unnecessary conversation to create distraction as if he has a plan, as if he understands anything. Of course, the whole notion is laughable, but I don't think it should be laughable because whatever he's doing right now is setting the stage for disasters in the future. For those who don't know what HTS is, it's Hay'at Tahrir Sham, which is an organization that changed its name from originally a Nusra Front, and the Nusra Front was basically the Syria branch of Al Qaeda. So this is kind of the shortest way of describing this organization that hasn't really fundamentally changed, neither ideologically nor in any other way. And now this associate of Al Qaeda now owns Syria, controls Syria. But the reason that suddenly this organization that is affiliated with some of the most notorious terrorist groups in the Middle East is no longer being frowned upon is its willingness to normalize with Israel. So we know that Ahmad al-Shara, formerly known as Muhammad al-Julani, has had secret meetings. His officials, his top aides, had various meetings with Israeli officials, American officials, kind of to facilitate the normalization with Israel because Israel is desperate for a win. Israel has not been able to achieve a decisive win in Lebanon, has not been able to achieve a real win in Iran, cannot defeat the resistance in Gaza. So they need a win so bad. So Mr. Ashara comes in there and say, you know what? Remove the sanctions of Syria on my party, on my group, therefore on Syria, and I will give you that win. That's really the exchange. But back to Trump not understanding the complexity of the Middle East. Every action in the Middle East has a reaction. Sometimes it takes few months, sometimes a few years, but it can reverberate beyond the national boundaries of a single country. We know, for example, that the destabilization that happened following the American invasion of Iraq in 2003 resulted in bringing Al-Qaeda to Iraq and destabilizing Iraq, and by extension, destabilizing Syria and other countries, and potentially Jordan, and I think quite soon. So when you come and validate a group like HTS and destabilize them, you are going to destabilize the Middle East in ways that perhaps are unprecedented compared to what happened after the invasion of Iraq. But he doesn't care because he doesn't understand. And whatever he does, he thinks it's a victory. I mean, they did what they did in Iraq, in Iran, and he came to talk about, the bombing of the various nuclear facilities, and he came to talk about the greatest military action in the history of the world. It's just ludicrous. The notions, the language, the discourse. Of course, Netanyahu is enjoying all of this because Netanyahu does want to destabilize the Middle East to create distractions for himself and his government, and because Israel thrives on destabilization. That's how settler colonial systems work. You need to destabilize in order for you to intervene militarily and to acquire more territories. So Trump is now playing Netanyahu's game to the letter, despite the fact that many people were hoping that maybe Trump is different. Maybe he's no Biden. Maybe he's going to be a different breed of American politicians, and he's going to kind of draw some lines in the sand for Netanyahu. Sadly, that did not happen. And to the contrary, he's proving to be even worse than his predecessor.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. It's interesting to me how Trump, and I know a lot of us were saying this as we watched him go to Michigan and tell the Arab Americans there that, oh, I'm going to bring peace to the Middle East. And I'm like, no, he's not. He's still talking about the quote unquote Abraham Accords. And as we've seen, this has been planned out for a number of years, right? Trump's focus is just on, oh, everybody just needs to normalize with Israel, and then there will be peace upon the Middle East. But as you were noting there, the fact that every action is going to have a reaction, and Trump comes in, and in the first 6 months, he's already got the US openly bombing Iran. I mean, when you look at the Middle East, and I know, we'll talk about the ongoing situation, the ongoing genocide targeting the Palestinians in a minute, and how this impacts them. But what are your concerns kind of for the region as a whole as you're watching the US and Israel target the axis of resistance in a number of different ways? And I don't necessarily think that the war with Iran is over, even though we're kind of in this weird standstill right now.
Absolutely. And we are going to talk about this in a second, but you did mention something really important, Rachel. You spoke about the normalization, and oh, we just need more normalization. The problem in journalism is that we usually look at the immediate events and their immediate aftermaths, but we rarely look at longer context. And I'm not talking about context of 19th century history. I am talking about Trump's first term in office and the normalization campaign that he launched with his son-in-law, Jared Kushner. I don't think until now we are actually able to grasp how that normalization campaign led to the destabilization and to the genocide in Gaza. Because when what he did one of the greatest sins you can do regarding Palestine in the Middle East, which is to create separation between Palestine and the Palestinian struggle and its Arab environment. Because yes, we know that Arab governments are corrupt, and yes, they are quite, many of them are lackeys for the US and other Western powers. But at the end of the day, they are still controlled by some sort of a popular consensus that Palestine is the main issue. And because of that kind of consensus, there is some sort of balance. Where they speak certain language and they behave maybe discreetly and behind closed doors in a different way. what happened during his first terms is that all the masks have fallen. And the real face of Arab dictators and authoritarian regimes became very obvious. And it seemed also that they were going to get away with normalizations and the marginalization of the Palestinian issue altogether with no consequences that could threaten their regimes. As a result, October 7 happened. October 7 happened from a political point of view as a way for the Palestinians to say, we know what you are trying to do. You are trying to completely eradicate the Palestinian cause and end the Palestinian people altogether. And we're not going to allow for this to happen. And therefore, we are going to force the Arabs back into the struggle. We are going to put everybody in the corner to realize that we are not the type of people who can be completely eradicated, destroyed, and diminished as if we never existed. And that's the whole notion of Palestinians need to put up or shut up, as was communicated between Jared Kushner and Mohammed ibn Salman. So the point of that story is that Trump is extremely dangerous. We spoke about how cowardly Biden was in supporting Israel to carry out its genocide. But we rarely speak about how Trump himself has facilitated that disaster in the first place by creating the political circumstances that forced Palestinians to take that sort of action. Now he is doubling down. He is going back to talk about normalization and he's bringing Syria. I mean, it's one thing to normalize between Sudan and Bahrain and United Arab Emirates. I mean, with all due respect, they are marginal countries. And some of these countries never really had a state of war with Israel in the first place. But Syria, Egypt, and Iraq are the three most important political power hubs in the Middle East. To sideline Syria is going to bring the kind of destabilization that is really quite unfamiliar to that region. And not just that, you are cracking down on the only elements out there that are creating some sort of a political balancing out act, which is the forces of resistance in Lebanon, in Iran, in Yemen, in Gaza. So the hope here is that this major gamble of Trump, he has this dream, or at least he's communicating that dream on behalf of Trump, which is to completely erase and weaken the forces of resistance or the axis of resistance, empower the pro-Israel camp in the Middle East, mostly the Gulf, but beyond that, and kind of create this new Middle East, which Netanyahu has been talking about for such a long time. I mean, this is, if you are going to define Netanyahu's foreign policy in a single phrase, it's going to be that. The new Middle East. He spoke already about changing the Middle East during the Trump first administration. Later on, after October 7, he began talking about the need to change. So he kind of go kind of one step back. And now he's talking once more about changing the face of the Middle East. So this is what Netanyahu is all about. And sadly, Trump is just playing exactly the game that Netanyahu wants him to play without understanding the dire consequences of this kind of action. By the way, we already spoke about the dire consequences of normalization during Trump's first term in office, and we were not wrong. And I don't think we are going to be wrong on this one either.
Yeah, I think that that's a really great point. And it is interesting how, even though we had 4 years of Biden, nothing really changed when it came to the policies he had in place. It's just they know that they can use Trump as kind of the ultimate tool, right? That he's going to go along with it and that he's going to sit there at the White House and talk about how the Palestinian people are going to be removed from their land. And he's going to present it as if it's a good thing and it's great for them. They don't want to live there. Think of all of the bombs that have been dropped on them. And yet, when you look at the Palestinians, and I know that we've talked about this in the past, just the sheer resilience and determination that they are going to do everything in their power to fight for their land. And as we've watched this genocide play out, and I know that there's plenty of people out there that will look at it and they'll say, oh, how can you call it a genocide? Oh, well, there's a number of different ways to show evidence of that. One of them, which I would argue, is this new scheme that the US and Israel have come up with through the so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, where they go in, they, kick out UNRWA, they kick out the World Central Kitchen, they make it so that they are the only source of bringing in any form of humanitarian aid. And then you're just supposed to look the other way as they kill hundreds of Palestinians seeking aid. I mean, it just, I don't know how it gets any more blatant, but how do you view the current situation with this ongoing genocide and really what the world has allowed to happen? Because the US and Israel have shown it's not going to get any better. They are just going to keep finding ways to make life worse for the Palestinians.
That's right. And I think, I mean, the fact that some people are even still arguing, Rachel, that how do you call this a genocide? I really don't know what can be said at this point. I mean, it's either someone is not paying any attention whatsoever, or they are paying attention, but they just don't feel comfortable accusing Israel of committing genocide. In the words of Bernie Sanders, I remember he was speaking at a university in Ireland. When everybody was at that point calling it genocide, and Bernie Sanders goes out there and he says, I feel uncomfortable with the word genocide, more or less. It just makes me queasy, is the word that he used. Well, I am sorry. It makes a lot of people feel queasy, but that's not the problem of the victims. It's the problem of those who feel uncomfortable with coding things, the way they are. This is a genocide. When you kill 20,000 children, it's a genocide. When you kill 17, 18,000 women in the matter of 20, 21 months, it's a genocide. When 10%, there's 10% of the Gaza population, absolute minimum of 10%, some people say up to 20%, that has been killed or wounded since the start of the war. And these are people who have already been living under a state of siege. I mean, some people have already been using the word genocide or incremental genocide in the case of Gaza, even before this actual genocide. And the Israelis themselves are not really lying about it. I mean, you have got to give them some credits. I mean, they say, that, from the very first day, they said no food, no water, no medicine. Palestinians are human animals, that we are going to push them out. They called it voluntary, voluntary migration. At one point, they spoke about dropping nuclear bombs on Gaza. We know, I think, according to the latest report by Francesca Albanese, if I remember correctly, she spoke about the total of 10 nuclear bombs, that's been kind of more or less dropped over Gaza in the matter of 21 months. And we're talking about a very, very small piece of land. I mean, I lived in Gaza until I was in my early 20s. And when we used to go and do long distance running, we did not have enough space in Gaza to run a full marathon. So you kind of have to be zigzagging in these refugee camps in order for you to make up the distance. It is that small. So to do all of this and to deny people food and to deny people water, to deny them medicine, children, there's piles of children at the Shifa Hospital and the Baptist Hospital. These are newborns that have no chances of survival. There was an image that emerged of like a pile of children on top of each other that, or they are trying to find a way to bury them in mass graves. So what's happening in Gaza is not just genocide. It is becoming one of the most gruesome genocides that are kind of registered or recorded in modern history. And the fact that Israel is still allowed to engineer that genocide with our tax money, with our political approval, with the involvement of American mercenaries who are killing. According to the Associated Press, there was a report saying that the Americans themselves involved with the so-called humanitarian foundations are actually participating in the killing and cheering with are killing children and young people standing in line to collect some life-saving food in various parts of Gaza. I really don't know. I mean, there are some arguments that I don't even feel like you kind of take away from the dignity of the argument when you argue about these things, that whether these acts constitute a genocide or not. But here's the thing that's really bothering Israel so much, is that the Palestinian resistance is disallowing Israel from achieving any permanent territorial gain in Gaza. Yes, they are in Gaza. Yes, they are occupying large parts of Gaza. But technically, Israel was always an occupier of Gaza, and the United Nations said that. after Israel left Gaza or supposedly redeployed out of certain parts of Gaza in 2005, the United Nations said no, Gaza remains an occupied Israeli territories because Israel controls the borders, Israel controls the skies, Israel controls the sea. So Gaza has always been an occupied place. Whether the Israelis are 2 kilometers in or 5 kilometers out, it doesn't make any difference. It's always been occupied. The question is controlling Gaza. They haven't been able to control Gaza, not for a day, not for a moment. And as a result, this insistence on pushing the Palestinians out. We destroyed all of Gaza, but we cannot destroy the Palestinian spirit. And the spirit is not an individual. It's not an individual spirit, it's a collective spirit. It's the spirit of the Palestinian people. And the Palestinian people understand that Israel is trying to exact a second Nakba. Nakba is a reference to the first ethnic cleansing of Palestine, where Israel was established atop the Palestinian historic homeland in 1948. The Palestinians know exactly what Israel is doing, and under no circumstance will they allow Israel to carry out another Nakba, where they are going to go to Doha and sign an initial and say, yes, Israel, you may gather our people in southern Gaza, in Rafah, in a special city that will serve as some sort of a concentration camp. By the way, that's what Israel Katz, the Israeli defense minister, referred to it. It is a concentration camp in order for us to push them into the Sinai Desert. That's not going to happen because the Palestinian, not because of the international community, not because of the UN, not because of the American pressure, but because of the resilience and the resistance of the Palestinian people themselves.
Yeah, the fact that we are in 2025 and we have any kind of state sitting there talking about creating a concentration camp, and exactly as Trump was talking about trying to repackage it, right? Claiming, oh, it's going to be a humanitarian city. It's like, no, it's not. And I think that the world, the international community really needs to wake up, because to go back to the start of this conversation, every action is going to have a reaction, and you cannot commit a genocide like this without there being consequences for years and decades to come. And I really appreciate all of the work that you're doing, continuing to raise awareness about what's really happening and continuing to speak out for the Palestinian people. Dr. Ramzy Baroud, a Palestinian-American journalist, author, and editor of the Palestine Chronicle, thank you so much for your time and insight.
Thank you very much, Rachel.
If anything in this video resonated with you, be sure to like it, share it with your friends, leave a comment. And as always, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to keep up with all of my work, make sure that you're subscribed to my page on Substack. That's rachelblevins.substack.com. That's where you'll find ad-free videos and new weekly episodes of my exclusive series for paid subscribers called Sanction. You can also catch Sanction over on my page on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Rachel Blevins. As always, thank y'all so much for all of your support, and I'll see you next time.